Okay, Chair, when you're ready, we are now live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Debbie. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the East Devon District Council's virtual community grant panel meeting today, the 2nd of February 2022. I'm your chair, Councillor Jack Rowland, and I'd like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. Based on the decision of Council, we will continue to hold virtual meetings until the 11th of May 2022. I would like to remind both members and public attending or watching that this council has delegated much of its decision-taking power to our senior officers. May I remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. In the event of a break in the internet connection, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we're not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Let's start with you, Councillor Rowland.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Key, I don't see online. Councillor Loudon may be late. Councillor Parr, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Pook, please.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Ranger has given her apologies. I can confirm your quorum, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. So we move on to agenda item 1, which is public speaking. I don't believe we have any public speakers. So agenda item 2 is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 25th of November 2021. If anyone has a comment on the set of minutes from that date, please do this by raising your electronic hand. If I have no hands raised, I will take this as an indication that you will endorse the minutes. But the good news is I don't see any hands being raised, so we can take that as endorsing the minutes. Thank you. So agenda item 3 is apologies. We have received apologies, I know, from Councillor Val Ranger, who has a medical appointment this morning. And I've also had a message from Councillor John Loudon that he expects to join the meeting, but will be late as he's had to attend a Sidmouth Town Council planning application meeting. Debbie, I don't believe we've had any other apologies, have we?
No other apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 4 is any declarations of interest? Over to you, Debbie.
Yep, members, please just raise your hand and then we'll go through that way. It's probably quicker. Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Yes, I just want to declare personal interest that I'm a Devon County Councillor, and obviously with one of the things that we're talking about is Devon County Council discussing locality budgets. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll take that as a no, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5 is matters of urgency. We have no matters of urgency that have been notified. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. There are no confidential exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. So we move on to agenda item 7, which is over to you, Jamie, to talk about the paper you produced about the grant options on pages 6 to 14 of the agenda. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Chair. So as you can see, there's a few options to be discussed, as was requested in the last community grants panel meeting. First on the agenda is a discussion that Devon County Council may be removing themselves from Crowdfund Devon, in which case the costs of running that scheme will go up for us. I have had confirmation from Devon County Council that they will be removing themselves from Crowdfund Devon, and they will be granting last applications in mid-February. So in a couple of weeks' time, they will stop giving out money through Crowdfund Devon. The contract with Crowdfunder, which is the platform, actually runs till the middle of May. So we could potentially keep running Crowdfunder and Crowdfund East Devon until the middle of May, and then bring in whatever our replacement is, or decide to keep going with that. The issue with Devon County Council removing themselves from Crowdfund Devon is that they were paying the bulk of the subscription fees to Crowdfunder. So it would be up to us then to fund that, which may cost £6,000 or £7,000. So again, it's up to members whether you decide to keep going with Crowdfund Devon and fund that £6,000 to £7,000 extra on top of what we were already paying as a subscription, or whether you wish to do something else with those monies. I've had an update from finance as well. Currently, we have £74,000 in the Crowdfund East Devon pot, which is a bit more than I'd guesstimated. When I wrote the report, I guesstimated about £50,000. So £74,000 left, and we need to decide what we want to do with that, really. As outlined in the report, the options are to continue Crowdfund East Devon without Devon County Council, as explained, with the higher costs. Or we could look for a different crowdfunding platform. I know that that's something that South Hams and West Devon are doing. They're removing themselves from the crowdfunding platform and looking for something else, because obviously when we looked at crowdfunding platforms last time, it was a way of getting grants that was in its infancy, and things have moved on, and there may be better value platforms out there that our communities can use that might be even easier to use. So would you like me to look for that? We could create a ring-fenced pot to continue the small community grants fund that's just been set up with the approval of this panel. Currently there's £20,000 in that pot. We don't know how long that will last. It could be that you decide to give a proportion of that £74,000 to the small community grants fund to keep that going. Or you could decide to give each East Devon District Councillor a pot of money as a trial scheme. But this, just to bear in mind that this would take significant resources to set up and administer, and it's not something, having spoken to a lot of the other local authorities that do this already, it's not something they would ever recommend as setting up as a 1-year grants fund, because obviously when you set it up, people expect it to keep going, and it takes a while actually for news of the grants fund and for applications to start trickling in. So if it was only for a year, that could cause some reputational issues for the council and for councillors. Or there's the option of running several Dragon's Den participatory budgeting events throughout East Devon, where we get in ideas from the local community, and then the local community decide how that money is spent. That's obviously quite resource intensive as well. I don't know if any of you have had involvement in the ones that we've done so far, but it does create really good networking opportunities within East Devon. So you get community groups talking to each other, you get them working out, joint projects together. But yeah, it's quite resource intensive. So I don't know if you want me to stop there and have a discussion about that particular part of the paper.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I'll open it up then to members. Who wants to go first? Jeff.
Yeah, Jamie, sorry for my ignorance on this, but just remind me exactly how the crowdfunder works, and how efficient has it been in building up a pot of money for projects, and what's been spent and what's out there at the moment.
Myself, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Having a bit of trouble unmuting myself at the moment. So if you have a look in the next discussion point, item 2, there is a section on crowdfunding, so I'm not entirely sure what page that's on. But there is a section about crowdfunding that runs through all the successful projects so far. It has been running for 3 or 4 years now, and basically what happens is community and voluntary groups get an idea for a project. They put that project onto the Crowdfunder website at the moment, but other websites are available. Then they raise a certain amount of money from their crowd, which could be local residents, user groups, families and friends of users of that particular project, people from miles away. So Beer Men's Shed, when they tried to raise money for a shed, they had people contributing that came on holiday to Beer and wanted to put something back into the local community. So yeah, you try and raise money from people, and then once you reach a certain threshold, so once you've raised 25% of the funding that you need, we look to go in and fund a middle portion of that. So maybe up to a maximum of £10,000 or 50% of the total project costs. So we look to go in and maybe fund £5,000 or £6,000 in the middle of that. And then it's up to them to raise the final amount from their crowd. So it has quite a lot of benefits that you don't get from a normal grants funding stream. We get better relationships with the voluntary and community groups and can help them as time goes on. They get, I'm sort of hand-holding some of them through the process because it's not something most of them have done before. So their capacity building and learning skills. We have had quite a few fantastic projects, but not numerous projects. So with the small community grants fund, for example, I'm expecting a wealth of smaller projects, and I'm expecting that to be, very quantity of projects. But with this one, we've got quite a lot of quality of projects, but not so many in terms of quantity. So for example, we gave £9,000 to a project to provide beach wheelchairs for the disabled in Axminster. So some people that have mobility issues or disabilities can perhaps go on the beach for maybe the first time in years or the first time in their lives and enjoy the nature there. We gave nearly £5,000 to the Solderton Community Workshop Project, which creates a workshop and other recreational facilities in Budleigh so that the community can get together and enhance skills, and it brings them out of isolation as well, creates social links. So that was a really good one. I'm sure most of you have heard of the community Waffle House in Axminster, which is going off and doing great, fantastic things. They were the first project we funded through Crowdfunder, and I think we've given them about £14,000 in total now to help. We've given Beer Men's Shed two lots of funding now, one for their first shed and one for their second shed because their first shed was so successful. £7,500 to a project from Honiton Trip, which helped them buy a wheelchair accessible electric vehicle. £2,000 to an Axminster based community interest company that is basically.
Sorry, Jamie, I didn't really need you to. I want you to go through the whole list, but so basically, have we got a total value of projects? So, for example, if there was £200,000 worth of projects, we've given roughly 50%. So it's cost us £100,000 to get £200,000 worth of projects. So we actually levered £100,000 out of the community. That's a sort. So just to get an idea of how efficient it is, because if it's just giving our money away, which is like the locality, community small buildings fund, which is our 22,000, soon to be 40-something thousand, then that's a straightforward bit of money. But if it's actually levering money and big lumps of money, then it's worthwhile. So can you summarise those figures?
I mean, we do fund a maximum of 50% of the projects, which leaves the projects 50% to find from elsewhere. I don't have any actual figures. I can work them out, but I don't have any off the top of my head. So for every project, at least 50% comes from elsewhere. And although it's been a grant stream with Devon County Council, we've been giving out amounts like £9,000, £5,000, and another £7,500. They've been giving amounts more like £1,000 or £2,000. So it's helped communities to lever in that small amount of money from Devon County Council, but it's also helping them lever in money from the crowd, from the local community. And those are things that I can certainly work out, yes, but I don't have them here at the moment.
I think to make a decision on the value of doing it, I think that's the sort of data we need. We want to know, what benefit is being crowdfunding being, because we can give our money away however we want to. There's no problem on that. But if we're going to another organisation, we want to know it's beneficial because it's levering new funds, and it's the totals we need, not just lots of little ones. So maybe, if we haven't got the data now, it's sort of defeating my argument that you need the data to make the decision.
I think it gives you a good idea, though, from the sort of figures that have been talked about, how much is being produced from crowdfunding and matching what we put in, more than what we actually put in ourselves. Just before I bring in other members, I see Councillor Loudon, John's now joined us. So good morning, John. Thank you. You joined us a little bit earlier than I expected. Can I just ask you if you've got any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Jack, and apologies, colleagues. I had another meeting in parallel, so no, I don't have any thing to declare.
Thank you. I did explain why you had to attend another meeting as well, John, so thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Jamie, yes.
I can just go through and try and work it out now. So while you're having the meeting,
right, we'll come back to you then.
Get it all sorted.
When you've done the calculation then. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Can I bring in Helen Parr and then Jess Bailey?
I think Jess was first, actually.
Okay, I knew I'd get that round the wrong way probably. I was concentrating so much on what
Helen.
was
Thank you, Councillor Parr.
Yes, so thank you for that. I get slightly confused about the different pots of money, because I know that in our last meeting we were talking about the small community grants amount, and I'm confused. So there's 70,000 left from Crowdfund East Devon, is that right, Jamie? And then another amount that we've already committed now to, well, our group has, but I think it hasn't been gone through council, to the community small grants panel. Can you just, and then I'll just make another comment if I may. Can I just ask that question to Jamie?
Of course, Jamie.
Yes, that's right. So there's £74,000 sitting in Crowdfund East Devon still, and there's £20,000 on top of that. So it was £94,000 in Crowdfund East Devon. We've removed 20 of that to go to the Small Community Grants Fund, which is all set up on the website and is being published in the form of a press release, hopefully today. Okay. So that will be up ready for people to apply for, which is great. Let your constituents know. And there's the other 74 that's in Crowdfund Devon, which is separate at the moment.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So, well, my comment would be about Crowdfund East Devon. I think that it's done some really, really good projects, but I think for many groups it's a difficult way to access money, and I think that's reflected by the few number of groups that have actually accessed it, because I know how hard that Jamie's worked running, training sessions and trying to encourage people to come forward. And so I, particularly bearing in mind that Devon County are going to be now opting out, and also that means that we'll end up paying 6,000 more than we already pay for that, I would personally be really reluctant to continue with that, because I think that, everybody's had a good shot at Crowdfund East Devon, and we're having projects coming back more than once, but it's been going for quite a long 3 or 4 years, and there's not that many projects that have come forward through it. And I think it is quite a difficult concept, and some people are better at accessing money that way than others. And I think that we should look at trying to do it in a different way. Personally, I'm not that keen on the Dragon's Den style approach. I think that, I don't know. To me, that just, I think not everybody will come forward. I prefer, I think, a more traditional approach, and that would be more by way of applications to our panel, or by way of locality budget. So at the moment, I think what I'll just say is I'm not so keen on carrying on with Crowdfund East Devon, particularly because of the associated costs and the fact it's been going for a while. And I feel that the Dragon Den may have a similar, I think it's resource intensive, and I'm not sure that it will necessarily get everybody coming forward for it in the same way that Crowdfund East Devon didn't necessarily get everybody coming forward for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Can I just ask a question before I bring Helen and then John in? Jamie, you mentioned that if we were to take over crowdfunding ourselves, we'd have to be paying £6,000 or £7,000. Would we be able to take that money out of the crowdfunding pot, or is that money we'd have to find out of our own budget?
No, that could be taken out of the crowdfunding pot. Up to now, we've been paying £1,000 a year in subscription, and that has come out of the pot itself.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Helen, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I agree with what Jess said, mainly. crowdfunding's been absolutely brilliant. I went to the Waffle House the other day. It was buzzing, and they're doing terribly well. And they're thinking of setting up a community phone line for phone Waffle. These beer sheds have been absolutely brilliant, but I think £6,000 to be on that platform is outrageous. I mean, I think £1,000 was a lot of money, was in effect wasted, which should have been going to these organisations. Did you say, Jamie, that there may be a sort of replacement, better platform that's coming on? Because I'd be interested to hear about that. And secondly, you said it runs till May, so at least we can carry on till May with it as it is.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I don't know if you were expecting an answer from Jamie then, were you? Jamie, did you want to?
Yeah. So
sorry, could you say about the other possible platform that I think you mentioned you might be able to, that other people are looking at?
Yeah, so we can certainly carry on, if you wish, with the current platform until May for no extra cost. And there are more and more crowdfunding platforms coming out all the time. So something that you may wish me to do is to go off and investigate those platforms and to see if there's one that's perhaps easier for groups to use, less costly, might have other benefits. At the time we selected Crowdfunder, they were the best one out there, but they may well not be now. And I would talk to my colleagues at South Hams and West Devon as well, because I know that they're continuing to do crowdfunding, but they're going to look to use a different platform. So they've done some of that investigation already.
Thanks, Jamie. Right, John, and then Jeff.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jamie, for the report. It's helpful, and just looking at your backdrop, I presume you've moved by now. Listening to what colleagues have just said, Jack, I get the point about the cost of the crowdfunder. It's what, 12% or thereabouts of the money that we've got available. And I don't like the idea of us not using it for our own good, if you like. But equally, I recognise that, and I've used Crowdfunder or a crowdfunding page in the past for a community group. I appreciate they've got overheads and costs, so I get that. I'm not quite sure how easy groups find the whole issue of crowdfunding. Forget which platform it is on. There's a difference, isn't there, between trying to go out through crowdfunding and actually going out trying to raise money. I know they're the same thing, but you do it in different ways, and I may do a disservice to the voluntary groups and around, but that they don't have the time, the energy, the skills, etc. And that's not to diss them, but that's just, I think, the reality of life. So I would tend to veer away if at this point from a crowdfunding linkage. So that's the first thing. I'm not sure in put COVID to one side, but in terms of the Dragon Den or something similar, I think, again, it's easier for groups to hide behind an application, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, than to have to come along and pitch. We've all watched The Apprentice, we've all watched Dragon's Den, and people get nervous, and I understand that. It's like going to an interview, isn't it, for work? So that doesn't necessarily appeal to me for those points. Locality funds, we had the discussion about this, I think, was it at the last meeting in part. And even if I was minded to be supportive of this at this point, £800 per councillor, I'm not sure I want to sit here and be judge and jury in giving that out locally, because I'm sure as heck I'm going to hack off more people than I'm going to please, I suspect. So that doesn't sit easily with me. So I'm sort of going back to, and I think it was Jess may have said it, the more traditional approach, the one we've been utilising thus far as a framework. I have a question, and forgive me, Jamie, if I've not read the document and seen the answer, but you talk at the very beginning about that it would give us a pot of about 50k to distribute on a one-off basis. So once it's gone, it's gone. Now the question for me is, does that mean it can stretch over a number of future financial years, or are we time bound to spend it?
So it can be stretched over a number of financial years. Yes, it is. Technically, it's Devon County Council's money that they allowed us to keep. That's an underspend of Communities Together Fund. I've spoken to my colleague there, and at the moment, you know, we get to keep it. I can't foresee an occasion where they would ask for whatever's left back, because they've sort of not written it off, but they've sort of given it to us and they don't think about it anymore. So as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty confident that we can keep it until we spend it, basically, which could be in 12 months' time or in 3 years' time.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Jack, can I just finish on that point then? And I just wonder, do we want to think about, normally we're looking at relatively small pots of money that we're giving out to people. Do we want to think, you know, if we've got 50k, you know, do we want to think that we're talking maybe possibly about five lots of 10k, you know, just trying to think of maybe slightly bigger pots and just seeing if we dangled that, what came back, what bids came back, and if we did that and we didn't get the bids, then we would then rethink and perhaps go back to the more traditional approach that we're used to, meeting after meeting. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, John. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you. I accept all the comments about, you know, maybe it's difficult, but I think the thing is that it's leaving more money out of the system, and by the sound of it, it's 50% more. So Jamie's got a pen going there. So it could, you know, she'll tell us the money, but if it's levered something like, you know, 50,000-80,000 pounds, which we wouldn't have, well, you know, surely that's worth doing. Yes, go to a different supplier, so it's not 6,000 pounds, it's 1,000 pounds. But you know, if we don't do something like this, all we do is spend our own money. But if we do something like this, we can actually get community input as well, and that's going to be more and more important in future. But the other thing about community input, it buys in sort of you know, it's like anything. You know, if you give something, it's not worth very much, or they don't appreciate it so much. But if they've actually put some work and money into it, it's appreciated more. So the two things, I think, as long as it's not an excessive percentage of the total amount levered out, if it's levering more money, it must be worthwhile.
Yeah, Jess, before I bring you back in, I take the point. I think it's a good one about whether you can leverage more money to support bigger projects as well through crowdfunding. We've already heard that we've got the ability to carry on with the existing scheme until May anyway. Now, whether we take this opportunity to actually re-advertise and relaunch our own East Devon crowdfunding scheme as soon as possible to see what reaction we get, and then we can always review the situation again in May to see how successful we've been about how many bids have actually come forward in that time. Just a thought at the moment. Anyway, over to you, Jess.
Thank you. I think the issue that I have there is that this has been running for 3 or 4 years and there's still 70,000 that hasn't been accessed. So I don't feel that it's I don't personally feel, yes, the groups may, you know, use it to get money from the community, but actually, I think it's a reflection of the fact that community groups don't find it an easy way to access money. And if we want to help community groups, we need to help them to be able to access that money. And if it had been really easy, that money would have all gone. So I think as well, you know, if we're spending £1,000 a year, so Devon County coming out in February, we could carry on till May, but I think that whatever crowdfund platform you go to, it's still going to be a similar type approach. There's still going to be fees associated with it. It's still going to be difficult for some types of groups to access. And I think we need to make it, you know, we're elected people, we're on the website, where people know who we are. If people have, you know, a traditional type query about how they can access money, they can come to us and we can explain it. And I think it's much easier to do it that way and to have a traditional grants scheme than it is to access via a crowdfunder scheme. And I really think that the fact that we've got 70,000 left, and Jamie can probably tell me how much we've actually contributed, but you know, that's been sitting in our account all this time rather than in the pockets of the community groups who are all doing really good work. So I would definitely prefer a traditional type approach, I think.
Thanks, Jess. John, over to you again.
Do you want to let Jamie out?
Jamie, do you want to come back in before John speaks?
Thanks.
Sorry, I can't find my virtual hand. So I've done my sums. So far in Crowdfunder, we've had 14 successful projects, which we've given out a total of £67,912 to. The total amount that those projects have raised, including our money, is £235,671. Sorry. Yeah. So for our £67,912, those projects have gathered in £167,759 from elsewhere. So essentially, for every pound we've put in, the groups and the projects have raised £2.47 from elsewhere. So that hopefully gives you an idea of the multiplication of the monies. Just to add as well that, yeah, crowdfunding is work for groups. I do regular training sessions, and probably about half of those groups I've handheld through the process, or kind of had to handhold through the process. Although, you know, that is obviously capacity building as well. So when they want to do it again, they can go off and do it on their own. Some of the groups have just put their stuff on there and run with it without much help from me. But yeah, it is quite resource intensive for groups that haven't done it before. So they do need quite a bit of help, some of them. There is obviously, as sort of been mentioned on the fringes, the option of setting up a version of our small community grants that actually gives out larger grants. That's something that you might want to think about. So the small community grants gives out £300 to £500 grants. So you could, for example, decide to set up a larger version of that, which we could just base on the small community grants fund, where it's a simple application form process. Maybe that gives out larger grants of up to £3,000 to £4,000 to try and make best use of the money that we have left. So yeah, just to throw those things in there as well.
Before I bring John in, Jamie, can I just ask, when you've run the free training sessions for crowdfunding, has there been good attendance at those?
Yeah, so I try and keep them quite small so that I can answer everybody's questions. So I've been running sort of multiple ones, but for example, the two that I did in November, we had about 10 attendees at each one. And I'm still hopeful that some of those will come through into projects. Obviously, then we had Christmas. So it may be that some of them still come through. But yeah, I do train quite a lot of people. And for some of them it's worth it, some of them it isn't. Some of them don't have projects that are suitable. For example, I did have one lady come on a training session who wanted to try and fund a wall in a cemetery that had fallen down, and obviously that's not an appropriate project for crowdfunding. So yeah, there are some where they find out their projects just aren't going to be successful, so there are other routes for those people. There are some that come and think, oh no, that's too much for us, we're just used to traditional application forms, and then back out at that point. There are some that think, oh yeah, this is, you know, a new way of doing things, let's try it and see what happens. And then there are some that just run with it full pelt. So yeah, it's very varied, the response I get in those sessions. Okay,
thanks. John, back to you.
Okay, not wanting to prolong this, Jack. I listened very closely to what Jeff said, and I sat there and I was I was going a bit like that when he was talking, and I get the points that he makes. But I think, if I'm honest, on balance, my personal preference would be not to go with crowdfunding. Equally, I think if we tried to set up our own crowdfunding arrangements, I think that's a distraction. I think it is our resources, our officer time would be taken away and used, having to be used to sort of deal with that. So I'm thinking about this, and I like the issue of perhaps having, we've got the small community grant fund, you know, having a medium or larger, whatever you want to call it, fund, and maybe up to 5k. And perhaps if we did that for the remainder of this financial year and for the whole of next financial year, that's what, 15 odd months, and then review it, because it may well be, you know, that you know, there is no one easy answer to all of this, and that would be, I don't know whether that's worth having as a proposal, and I don't know whether we would want to put the whole of the 50k into it, or whether we want to put some of the 50k into something like that and shift the balance into our if we can, into our ongoing community grants fund.
Thanks,
Is
John.
it 50 or 74?
70, isn't it? I think John didn't hear Jamie's earlier comment before he joined, saying exactly what the figures were at the moment. I should check with finance. So John, it's closer to 70. It's 70.
Right. Sorry, I heard that literally as I came in. It's 74 in the crowdfunding East Devon, and 20k in the small grants fund. Yes. Yeah. So yeah. Apologies.
No, I thought you were on the point of actually making a recommendation.
Well, I'm trying to sort of put a recommendation, but it's not. I'm just trying to float something there to see whether people are coming along with my train of thought.
I'll let you cogitate a little bit more then, while I bring in some other members, because I've got 3 virtual hands back up again. I didn't notice which order they came up in, so I think Jeff, it might have been first, then Jess, then Helen. No? I'm not doing very well in the order of hands going up this morning, am I? There's only a few of us as well. Remind me then, who was first?
Helen's next.
Helen, I beg your pardon, Helen. My apologies.
I didn't know. Anyway, thank you very much. Yes, I'd still like to know what these other authorities are doing in the way of looking for a replacement crowdfunder, because as I say, we've got till May paid. But did you say, Jamie, that other authorities that there might be other platforms around? I mean, have you any idea whether they are going to be easier and hopefully a lot more reasonable? Because I certainly don't support, if it's going to cost the sort of money that you're talking about, on our own. Thank you.
Jamie.
There are certainly other crowdfunding platforms around, and I know that South Hams and West Devon have done a bit of exploration, and they've found one that they might like to go with. but I would have a talk to them about that. They do all run on virtually the same premise, which is community groups get together a project, they put that project online, and then they go to their local community to try and raise money for that. So in terms of it being easier for the groups, it may be easier on different platforms that the form may be easier to fill in on different platforms. Things may be easier to understand on different platforms, but they are still running the same premise as the one that we've got at the moment. So it may or may not be easier. I would think that we can get one where the subscription that we pay is less. But yeah, it would need to be a piece of work to kind of explore that. But I would think that a better platform would be possible. Better in what way, I'm not entirely sure at the moment.
And the other thing is, when the 74,000 has run out, where would we get any funding from? We'd be the ones funding. But I do think it's wonderful that you draw in so much funding above what you put in. I think that's what I'm loath to give up.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Who was next?
This time.
You are next now, then, Jeff.
I'll speak anyway because
I should have deferred.
Jamie was going to answer.
Keep an eye on the order for me. Over to you then, Jeff, and then Jess.
Well, I take on board that people saying you want to get something simpler and you like the traditional one, but I don't buy that as a reason for not taking up the opportunity to leave more money out of the community. I do find all the different grants we have, especially with all the COVID related grants and the business related grants, you seem to get a grant to get a grant to get a grant sort of thing these days. Perhaps we should actually look at all our different community grants and this thing and just decide as a council, let's have a lump of money which is going to be allocated to communities, and there's 1 or 2 or 3 different criteria you can apply in. You can apply as a small community, which is like a £5,000 grant. You can go for bigger ones, or you can go for crowdfunding. And as I say, that total pot, which I don't know how big it could be if you add them all together, could be used. And it's on almost like a first come first served basis till the end of the year. We still have to assess them, say whether or not we're going to support it. The crowdfunding is slightly different because we say it will be supported if they get their 50% or their 25%, and that's the next 25% if they get it. But I would like to see a much simplified system anyway, because I do think we have got too many different titles, and that's half the problem. People get confused about what they can apply for. They think something's started, something's finished. So put them all together and allow the actual lump sum to be applied to different areas, and then if all money goes on crowdfunding, well, okay, great. We've crowdfunded, but we've actually levered in a lot more money than we would have been able to give. If it all goes on small community grant things, okay, the whole lot goes. No crowdfunding, no other money's come in, and it's just all our money. So don't throw away the opportunity by discounting crowdfunding. But yes, look at different maybe providers.
Thanks, Jeff. Over to you, Jess. And then I think we might be ready to formulate a recommendation.
Oh, I'm going to lower my hand. I hear what everybody says about leveraging money from out there. But if we do that, if we have a grant scheme that says that we'll only go up to 50%, then we're doing that anyway. And I'm not quite sure now that Devon County Council are opting out how that affects the funding through the crowdfunder scheme. And obviously they won't be participating, from what Jamie says, in any new scheme that's set up. So I'm not sure to the extent to which actually that crowdfunder does achieve more. It might achieve a bit more, but if we're contributing, if we're requiring match funding anyway, and also if there's 14 schemes in 4 years, that's only 3 schemes a year. Plus, I think that we can't forget that there are people who are digitally excluded. And I reckon there's probably at least 10% of our communities who aren't even online. So you're automatically removing any of those people from going through a scheme. And I think that we should be putting it into a traditional scheme where we have match funding, where we assess the applications, and I think we should draw crowdfunder to a close, because I'm not convinced that it hasn't actually got that money into the community in 4 years. Brilliant though those projects are, and I think that we should put it into the balance into a pot, that we should administer a scheme, match funded scheme, and that we look at maybe increasing the amount up from 500 to 5,000, and we administer it until it's gone, and when it's gone, it's gone. So that would be my proposal.
Okay, is there a seconder for what Jess has just proposed? John, is that a hand up that you're seconding? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Can we hear from Jamie, please, Chairman?
Yeah, sure. I've only just seen a hand go up though. Jamie.
Hi. If we, just to mention that if we were to set up a medium level grant stream with 50% match funding, that match funding in my experience and in other grant funders' experience wouldn't be from the community. The majority of it would come from other grants providers, such as the lottery. Obviously, a certain proportion of it would come from the community, but just be prepared that other grants providers would generally provide the majority of that 50% match funding. And just to mention as well that DCC only used to provide grants of about £1,000 to £2,000 for each project through Crowdfunder, and so their impact was quite small, really. And yeah, when it's gone, it's gone. We're not expecting to be able to continue this from main council budgets, obviously, with the financial situation that we're in.
Okay. Well, we've had the proposal put forward and John has seconded it as well. So I think we need to take a vote on that. Debbie, did you manage to take the bones out of that recommendation that Jess put forward?
Yeah, so Chair, just to clarify, the proposal was about using a traditional scheme, but what wasn't in the proposal was some more detail around what you've discussed already as terms of a medium-sized scheme. So it depends how precise, really, members, you want to be in putting forward a recommendation to Cabinet. So you previously talked about applying basically the rules of the small fund that you've already discussed at previous meeting, and that went through to Cabinet, applying to a medium fund where they're making an application of up to £5,000. So if I can just check from the proposer and seconder, is that the kind of figures that you're talking about, to just put some meat on the bones of what you're putting forward? If you can confirm, that would be great.
They're both nodding, Debbie.
Well, just for members of the public benefit who might be watching.
I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so on that basis then, members of the group, if you're happy to vote using your green ticks if you're in support of that proposal, red cross if you're against, or raise your electronic hand if you are abstaining. Thank you. So, Chair, I have 3 votes in favour, 1 vote against, and 1 abstention. So that is carried as it stands at the moment, Chair. Thank you. Okay,
thank you very much, Debbie. Okay, well, thank you, members. I think that was a very worthwhile discussion to explore all the different avenues. So that actually brings our meeting to a close.
Chair, sorry to cut across you. I'm just trying to dot the I's and cross the T's. So what Jamie had put in her paper were a number of potential options that we could think about. So crowdfunding, locality budgets, etc. Do we also just want to note the report, but also make a point that we haven't found favour in the other methods as set out in the report? Because, or am I going too far?
Thank you, John, for your thoughts. Jamie's paper gave us a lot of information, but there was no actual recommendation in favour of one of the options in there. So I think by default, with what we've put forward now and just voted on, covers that point anyway. So I feel satisfied that that covers all the points. And I did thank Jamie for the detail in her report at the start of the meeting as well, with the amount of work she's put into this. So, okay, does that answer your point, John? But thank you for the interjection anyway. I'll take it on board. So, as I said, that brings our meeting to an end today.
I was just going to say, is it worth, because we got crowdfunding going till May, is it worthwhile just making sure we get the publicity out to say, you know, stopping in May, so get your application in quickly?
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. I think, Jamie, if you could take that on board as well, that we need to probably publicise that very point as well.
What's that pen walking across Jamie's face?
She was writing something down, wasn't she? That's a big pen. Okay, I'll try for the third time now to bring the meeting to a close then. And thank you everyone for taking part, and for any members of the public that have been watching. However, can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then your comments will be live to the public. Thank you for your attendance.